Thanks everybody for coming out for Sundays on Thursdays. My name is Nauman. I'm from the Madison Classical Guitar Society. We do a lot of stuff in the area around Madison, and we also perform in Stoughton a lot too, so a lot of our members do a lot of things in the area. Happy I could come down to McFarland today and play a little bit for you. The first piece was an anonymous piece. We don't know who wrote it, but it's called commonly Spanish Romance is the name of it. I've heard a lot of people from different countries claim it as their own folk song though, so it's one of those melodies that's made it around to a lot of different communities and countries over time. The second piece was an easy study by Fernando Sor, Spanish composer. Wrote prolifically for the guitar, although the guitar that he played was much smaller than this one. Very diminutive instrument. I've got one to play a little bit later that sounds a little more like the kind of instrument he would have used, but for now I'm going to play another one of his studies. The first one was in C major, this one's in B minor. Thank you. Next piece I'm going to play is going to skip forward a couple hundred years. This last one was written in 1934, I believe, if I remember correctly, by a Brazilian composer named Heitor Villa-Lobos during a time he spent in Paris. So Brazilian composer, living in Paris, dawn of the jazz age. You can kind of hear it going from romantic classical into jazz a little bit. So a little bit of music history there, but still very kind of Brazilian feeling. I'm going to play a couple pieces by him tonight over the course of the evening. But the first piece is one of his preludes. This is prelude number 1 in E minor. 15 minutes. No, I've been playing about since 8th grade, so nearly 25 years, professionally almost 20. So studied in college. Before that, it was just high school bands. My name's Tom. You're welcome. I'm going to jump back in time a little bit again, a couple hundred years also. When I say I'm playing the oldies, they're 400 years old. It's important. The next piece I'm going to play is a minuet. It's another anonymous piece. We don't know who wrote it. It's just kind of one of those things that has been around so long and someone eventually wrote it down. Nobody really knows who started it. But it's an early sort of Renaissance period minuet. Early Baroque. Something like that. Many of these pieces are very short, especially the older ones. The easier ones that I play, these are kind of frames meant to improvise on for half an hour. I memorize the songs. I'm not much of an improviser, so you get the little snippets of it. So take that home and make up your own. As I mentioned, though, that one was anonymous. Early Baroque, so think mid-1600s, early 1600s, somewhere in there. We'll stick in that era for a little bit here. The next piece I'm going to play is by J.S. Bach, name that might be familiar. Bach wrote a lot of keyboard works. Bach also wrote a lot for lute, which was a predecessor to this thing. What else can we say about it? The piece that I'm going to play next was originally a harpsichord study, so it was written for a keyboard. That was eventually transferred over to lute because people liked it so much, and then eventually, over time, was translated to the modern guitar. So this one's been around the block. Titles haven't been dynamic this far. This one is also called Prelude. It's BWV 999 for those keeping track of catalog or numbers. It's Prelude in D minor. jump back up to modern times now again, almost, back up to Villa-Lobos, who we mentioned earlier. Wrote in the 30s and 40s, Brazilian composer. Next piece I'm going to play by him is called a choro. Pardon my Portuguese, my pronunciation is horrible. Choro I think of like a chorus, so something happens, something new happens, then they bring back that first thing, something else new happens, and then they bring back the first thing again. So it's kind of got that structure to the song. So it's also done in a dance form of a mazurka. So this next piece is called Mazurka Choro. Go full modern now. This is the guy who's still alive, still kicking, still in the Czech Republic composing music, doing all kinds of stuff. I had the fortune of going to the Czech Republic when I was in college for a guitar festival. Did not get to meet this guy, but he's still one of my favorite composers. These next ones are kind of a little bit ear-stretching. If you've listened to any like contemporary classical music, like new stuff, can be a little difficult to get your ears around sometimes. The good thing about these ones is they're very short, and there's 5 of them, and they've all got kind of an image attached to them, so you can kind of work with that a little bit. It's 5 short movements that go through the cycle of a storm at night. So there's 5 movements. They're called After the Sunset, Heavy Sky, Storm, Storm is Over, and the Sun is Back Again. So 5 little short movements are about a minute each. And they each try to paint a picture. So we've seen enough storms lately, I think you'll have some reference. The first piece is After the Sunset. Gotta Be Sky. Piece of Storm. Storm is over. Last piece is The Sun Is Back Again. Ends rather abruptly, but it's a good piece. Gonna bounce back in time again, back to the Renaissance era. Played a couple of Renaissance era pieces so far. If you're not familiar with music history, the Renaissance is the era just before the Baroque. They kind of morph into each other, share a lot with each other. But Renaissance is about where music, it's almost to the point where music had just started to get written down, where it was starting to be codified. Different people were agreeing on ways to write down music, so different people were coming up with their own things. But it was an interesting time because songs were traveling across borders, people were sharing music. They could write it down and give it to somebody else, and someone in Germany could play something that was written in Spain. Or anywhere for that matter. So the next piece is another anonymous piece, unfortunately. We don't know who wrote it, but it's another one of those pieces that I will probably play on the smaller instrument in just a little bit, just to kind of give you a comparison of the contrast, what it sounds like on the modern, this great big thing here, versus what it would have sounded like on these really delicate, smaller instruments they used back in the day. So it's called Wilson's Wild, and I hope you like it. sometimes songs have to end because you have a mosquito in your ear. That happens. The next piece is another one of those kind of from the same era, but it's one that kind of bridges the Renaissance and the Baroque. So we've heard a little bit of both. The Baroque era is musically typified by them figuring out that melodies can work against each other. You can have more than one thing going on at the same time, and melodies moving against each other create chords that create harmonies and all this kind of stuff. So they were just starting to work that into popular stuff. The next piece is by Johannes Berger, who was around about 100 years before Bach was. So this is also early Baroque, but you can kind of see how harmony is moving from one harmony to another. We're taking the place of just kind of melody and bass line and stuff. So this one's called Toccata Arpeggiata. I'm going to play one more piece, and then I'm going to take a short break, and I'm going to come back with some of that other stuff I've been talking about. Got the little guitar over here. I've also got a steel string and modern electric guitar as well that I'm going to play a couple pieces on just to show you what a couple of new composers are doing as well. This next piece is by Francisco Tárrega. It's called Recuerdos de la Alhambra, or Remember the Alhambra. The Alhambra is a castle in Andalusia, Spain. So it's a lovely setting. And it uses tremolo pretty extensively. If you don't know what that is, it's a repeated note to move the melody around. With guitar, it's not like violin or voice. You can't get louder once you've made the noise. You make the noise and it fades away. So in order to have any dynamic in there, you either have to keep playing the note or turn the volume up. Or to keep playing the note. So, Recuerdos de la Alhambra. Thanks a lot, everybody. We're going to take a short break. I will be right back with more. Thank you very much for coming out again. Thank you. I want to thank everybody for sticking around. Once again, my name's Tom Nauman. I'm from the Madison Classical Guitar Society. We've got a bunch of members up there that do a lot of this kind of stuff, just try to get word out about music history and the history of the guitar itself, because that's our favorite thing. We have a number of things that happen up in Madison on regularly. Lakeside Street Coffee House hosts the Classical Guitar Society a couple of times a month on Friday evenings. If you look us up, Madison Classical Guitar Society on Facebook, you should be able to find that. We post everything there, or MadisonClassicalGuitarSociety.org. You can also find some of the listings there as well. I'm going to jump right back into it with a couple of Renaissance pieces again, and then I'm going to play one of them or two of them on the little guitar there so you can hear, again, kind of what it would have sounded like on an instrument at the time, because they were much smaller, much more delicate. This is not one of those instruments. I can't afford one of those instruments, but this is kind of emulates that sort of thing. The next two pieces are by John Dowland. He's an English composer and kind of known for being the first rock star, just because many musicians of his time made their living by patronage. They were hired by a house to be the musician. That's what they did. They played for the same people all the time, did their stuff. John Dowland was fortunate enough to be famous in his own lifetime and tour around Europe, which was really rare in the time. So people knew who he was famous, and wrote for many famous people while he stayed with them for long periods of time. The next two pieces he wrote during his stay in Denmark for the King and Queen of Denmark. First piece is called King of Denmark's Galliard, and the second piece is called Queen Elizabeth's Her Galliard. As promised, I'm going to grab the little one now. This is just like a much smaller version of a normal guitar. It's tuned just like a guitar. It's actually tuned sort of in the same range as a ukulele. So many of the songs that you heard me play, the Renaissance pieces, could be played on a modern 4-string ukulele, but this has got the extra strings to make it a full guitar, but it's a little higher pitched, it's a little more delicate sounding, but this is kind of, sort of, an emulation of what the period instruments would have sounded like a little bit. So I'm going to play Wilson's Wild, which you heard a little while ago, and then I'm also going to play King of Denmark's Galliard, which you just heard a minute ago, and kind of compare and contrast there, what they would have sounded like back in the day. A little bit different sound, a little higher, a little more delicate. This is essentially like a guitar with a capo on the 5th fret, if you play guitar at all. So slap a capo on a guitar, and then cut the rest of the neck off because you don't need it. The next piece I'm going to play is King of Denmark's Galliard, which you just heard a minute ago, but on a tinier guitar. Start over. One of the downfalls of having a smaller guitar, the frets also get much smaller. So, stumbling over my own fingers. Also, as promised, I brought kind of a modern electric hybrid steel string guitar to show you some of what modern composers are doing. So I'll grab that and I'll be right back. Next two pieces I'm going to play are by another English composer who is still alive, still bopping around. He'll come through the Midwest every once in a while. You might be able to catch him in Chicago. I saw him in Spring Green a couple of years ago. His name is Adrian Legg, with 2 G's. He's English, but he has a long background in playing in bluegrass, banjo, and stuff like that. So some of his technique, the frailing and stuff like that, comes from that tradition. A couple of pieces that I'm going to play, maybe not so much, but you might hear a little bit of it in there. Second to tune here. Guitars in general are very susceptible to humidity and temperature changes, so as the sun starts going down here, these things are going to drop out of tune really quick. That's a little better. First piece I'm going to play here I've used for a lot of weddings and things like that. This is called Mrs. Jack's Last Stand. They're both very pretty pieces though, so don't hold their titles against them. Got one more by the same guy. This next piece is also by Adrian Legg. The title of this is just Anu, A-N-U. Also another pretty one. What? Anu, A-N-U. A-N-U is the name of the song. It's by Adrian Legg with 2 G's. Yep. I'm going to switch back to the other guitar for a little bit. You stick around. Thanks much. Thank you very much. You got time for a couple more yet? I'm going to try another 20th century piece, early 20th century. Again, this is kind of in that Villa-Lobos era where it was crossing over into jazz a little bit. Actually, post that. Scratch that. This is later. It's much later. A couple decades later. This next piece is called A Day in November. Doesn't exactly fit today, but it's still a very nice piece. Thanks a lot. Looks like everybody's packing up. I'm going to play one more piece. This is by Heitor Villalobos again. And this next piece is called Choros Number 1. Thanks a lot, everybody. Thanks for coming out and supporting the charity, and appreciate y'all coming. Thanks.